Hello friend, I am Rahat Hassan, Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Before going to start this particular lecture on a very specific topic and very relevant topic, that is international political economy, I would like to welcome all of you in this particular online course on international relations in a changing world. In the last class, we have discussed about international political economy, the basic themes or the basic core or the core of the international political economy. So, in this particular lecture, again on international political economy, we will explain some more things which are related to international political economy as a kind of approach to understand the activities or the dynamics of international relation. So, I will be speaking on in this particular lecture about international political economy, the overview of this particular topic that we have already covered in the last class about the rise of international political economy, what we study in international political economy to understand international relations. In addition to that overview of the things that we have discussed in the last class, we will also discuss about the tradition or the various approaches that to explain international relations from the perspective of international political economy. So, in that regard, we will discuss two important or two broader theoretical explanation about the international political economy. One is the traditional approach to understand or to explain international relations, and another is the new or modern approach of international political economy to understand the relationship between politics and economics that we call or refer in the discipline of international relations as international political economy. And we also try to discuss the present status or the present position of international political economy in the globalized world, that is the globalization debate in international political economy. So, these are the things that we try to cover up in this particular class. So, in the last class, we discussed about the rise of political economy as a kind of approach to understand the dynamics of international relations. As we have discussed in the last class that the political economy is a kind of study of international relations from the perspective of the relation between politics and economic factors in the discipline of international relations. So, it is basically referring the political economic relation in the discipline of international relations. How the political factors which was dominated during the Cold War period and also before the Cold War period, the economic factors more precisely after the end of the Cold War and before that also during the Cold War period as well, how that economic factors, economic institutions, the economic aspirations of the state and the economic concern of the state dominated the political discourse, the decision making by the statespeople or the statecraft, and how that economic factors is basically influencing the state's behavior in the nation state system. So, these are the basic things that we study in the discourse of international political economy within the broader discipline of international relations. So, in that context, we see in the last class that during the Cold War period or just before the Cold War period, means after that Second World War, end of the Second World War, there was a kind of debate on the status of the world economy. As we know about that the First and Second World War, there was a total destructions in the West, in the Western countries, more dominantly the European countries faced so much crisis, rather economic crisis in their nation state system. Every state in the Europe facing the economic crisis, and in 90s, 20s and 30s also there was again a big crisis that we called as the Great Recession or the Great Economic Depression in the European economic system. So that during the Cold War, during the First and Second World War rather, the economic problem, and after the end of the Second World War, there was a kind of debate on the status of the economy which was faced by the European and American European state and also including that American economy. So in that debate there was a kind of discussion in Bretton Woods as we have discussed about, and the major thing is to debate over the economic conditions or the economic crisis faced by the European economy. In addition to that, to respond the crisis that emerged because of the two world war and also the economic depressions in 1920s and 30s, to respond that sort of crisis, there was a kind of debate in Bretton Woods in United States of America to respond that sort of things and to create a kind of stable economic monetary system for regulation of the trade and commerce among the various states in the nation state system. So in order to achieve that or to respond that sort of things, there was a kind of creation of the Bretton Woods institution that created many economic institutions, International Monetary Fund, IMF, and also IBRD and GATT. These were the three important economic institutions created as a result of the Bretton Woods discussion in United States of America. And they also agreed to have the open and free market economic system in the nation state system. So the process of open market system, free economy, free flow of income, exchange, goods, these are the things that was discussed in the Bretton Woods discussion. And the United States of America agreed upon to promote that sort of economic institutions. But what happened during the Cold War period, that priority of the United States of America to support the Bretton Woods declaration and to sustain or to support that sort of economic institution, the United States of America also confronted in a different kind of situation that arises out of the Cold War politics between USA and USSR. So the United States of America, in reaction to the Soviet Union expansion in the European states, the United States of America adopted the policy of containment to contain the area of influence of the Soviet Union, that is the former USSR. In order to contain that, the United States of America also engaged in the economic reconstruction of the European state. And more precisely in that context, the United States of America adopted a policy for economic assistance to the states of the Europe. And in that context, we can recall the Marshall Plan adopted by United States of America. So that Marshall Plan, through that, United States of America pumping or started giving more assistance, economic assistance to the European states. In addition to that, the United States of America during that period also, means during 60s and 70s, adopted a policy to create more infrastructure in the United States of America. So the infrastructure building and also giving assistance to the economic assistance to the European state, that created a kind of pressure on the economy of the United States of America. And because of that reason, the United States of America changed its policy to support or actively engage to sustain that sort of economic institution or economic system. In addition to that, the United States of America also started a kind of imposition or raised the economic interest or surcharge value on the import, 10% surcharge value to the import duties or import items, the items coming from the other side of the world to the United States of America. And in that context also, the United States of America announced that the USA is no more supporting to convert the dollar to gold at the price of 35 per ounce of gold. So that was the promise in the Bretton Woods, that the dollar will be converted, the value of the dollar would be converted into a fixed value, that $1 would be equal to the 35 rupees as United States dollar of the gold values. So that promise was not also supported by the United States of America. So these were the major reasons that to decline or to face a kind of problem to that sort of institutions or the promise of the international monetary system which was promised in that particular debate or the particular discussion that we see it as a kind of Bretton Woods institution. In 1970s also, the policy of protectionism was adopted by United States of America. The policy of protectionism is basically what is to not allow the other goods to come into the United States of America, means it impose a kind of a taxation and some sort of regulations also import system to the United States of America. So the larger country, the major countries at that point of time, more industrialized nations at that point of time, adopted the policy of protectionism, and that was considered a kind of deviation from the promises that was adopted during the Bretton Woods conference. What we are trying to understand here is that how that Bretton Woods institutions was created, what was the vision of that, what was the vision of the Bretton Woods institutions and Bretton Woods promises, that how actually changed because of the many factors that emerge in the nation state system, and more precisely in the context of America or in the context of European states and European systems. So these created a kind of new kind of economic system, a new kind of things, and as a result of that, the third world countries or the developing countries nowadays, they were dissatisfied with the things which emerged in the economic aspect of the state engagement in the nation state system. And because of that reason, the newly developed nations or the developing nations adopted or demanded a new kind of system, economic system, that they called as the new international economic order, because they are satisfied with the promises which was done by the industrialized nation, more importantly United States of America. So with that dissatisfaction, they demanded the new economic order or new economic international order, which will be based on more equal participation, more equity, more just, more transparent, and would give more voice to the third world nations or the developing nations. And in addition to that, there was a new sort of scholarship or new intellectual exercise again going on to respond the economic and political interdependency and the economic interdependency of the states and state collaboration to respond the economic situation or the economic system or the global economic system. So in that context, certain theory like dependency theory, the concept of the theorization of development and underdevelopment, why these developing nations are not achieving that sort of equality or that sort of economic vibrancy or economic stability or economic development as compared to the industrialized nation. So in that regard, there are various theories that we called as the dependency theory, or the theory that explain the dependency or underdevelopment on the part of the developing nations. So the various writers that talks about that in the coming discussion, we will discuss later on in more detail. In addition to that, the work of the Robert Cox and also Robert Cox and Joseph Nye, the book that why nations are interdependent to each other, why there is a dependency, and what are the problems in that economic systems of dependency of the state. So these work, and that also the Amin cycle dependency, other dependence theories that explain why the third world nations are actually facing that sort of problem. In addition to that, in the early decades of the 21st century, more precisely in 2007, there was another sort of debate because of the rise of China, rise of Korea, Brazil, India as an emerging power in terms of economy as well. How these sort of nations is actually challenging the Western dominancy on economics, and how this economy is actually influencing the economic systems or economic world system. So in that regard, the conception of G20 is very important, and the G20 as a group where the developed nations and the developing nations is actually discussing about to formulate and to regulate the world economic system. So, in that context, we see a kind of journey as a journey, how economic activities, how the economic factors is actually influencing the political setups as well. In the before that in the starting phase up to the Cold War period, we see a kind of political dominancy where the geopolitics, the geostrategy, power dynamics in terms of power dynamics among the states, the national interests which define more in terms of achieving power, national power, and power also defined in terms of hegemony of the state. So, that sort of things were the major things that we discuss in the discourse of international relations. But with the arrival of that political, in addition to the political factors, the economic factors, arrival of that in the discourse of international relations, because of the things that we have discussed, that created a kind of new kind of frontiers or the new kind of discussions in the international relations, and that discussions we understand we called as international political economy. So, these are the things that is important to understand, the basic things which are related to the international political economy, how the economic factors is actually interrelated with the political factors, and that is the basic themes or basic concern that we study in the discourse of international political economy. Friends, now we will discuss the two important theoretical explanation of the things or the discussions that we have done to conceptualize, to understand the international political economy approach in international relations. As we see, there are various layers, there are various kind of explanation about the state interdependency in economic sphere and the how economic factors is actually related to the factors and the forces of politics. So, in that regard, there are various explanation about the relationship between the politics and economic factors. So, to conceptualize that or to understand that, we have two important approaches broadly to understand the conception of international political economy in the discipline of international relations. So, in that context, we have a traditional approach, and another broader categorization of the approach that we have and that we will discuss in today's class is the modern approach, or the modern approach, or also we call as the new approach in international political economy to understand the economic political relationship in the context of international relations. So, the first we will take to start our discussion that the traditional approach to international political economy. So, in that context, we have the three important sub-theory of traditional approach to international relations. First is the mercantilist view or mercantile approach as a traditional approach to international relations, and we also have the another sub-theory within the traditional approach to international political economy is the Loiberal approach to understand under the political economic relationship, that is the international political economy as a subject matter or theory to understand international relations. And within the traditional approach to international political economy approach, the last approach that we have and that we will discuss today's class is the Marxist approach or the economic explanation that we shortly call as the Marxist approach as a traditional approach to international political economy approach. And then we will discuss another categorization of the approach of international political economy, that is the modern approach or the new approach to international relations. And in that context, we will discuss rational choice model or the new utilitarian conception to international political economy approach as a modern or new approach to IPE. And then we will discuss the social constructivism or the constructivist approach as a modern or new approach to understand international political economy or the relation between the political economic factors in the domain of international relations. So, friends, we will start first with the first traditional approach. Within that, the mercantilist approach or the mercantile view as a traditional approach to international political economy to understand that sort of factors, political economic factors. Friends, in that sense, the basic things in that the states are the main actors or the states are the main unit. The actors in the international economic system or the world economic system, it is the state that interact with the rest of the state. So, in that context we can see that the relations between economics and politics is more, politics is what, politics as a device, and the objective is what, politics is decisive, which means that the state's objective is to achieve political power or political gain or to create or to achieve hegemony in that nation state system, and economic factors or the economic issues in the state or vis-a-vis to state, these are economic factors are the means to achieve the political ends or the political power of the state. So, in that context we can say that the economic factors or the economic objective of the state is subordinate to the political object or political hegemony or political power of the state. So, that remain the realistic approach to international relations, where the realistic theorist views that or argued that it is the state that are main unit and state interests are paramount, and when the state interact with the other state, the protection of the national interest, which expressed in terms of security, which in terms of power seeking, in terms of dominancy of the state or state egoism, these are the important national interest of the nation or a particular state. When the state started interacting with the rest of the state, these are the paramount objective, primary objective, which is political in nature, security in nature, survival in nature, and to enhance political power in nature. So, these are the basic objective of the state, and in the interpretation of political economy approach from the perspective of Mercantile, they argued that the state primary objective is to achieve the political power, and the economic factors or the economic issues are the means, through that only state can enhance its political power, which means that the relationship of the states in the nation state system, which is conflicting in nature, and it is based on zero sum game, which means that the economic objective achieved by any state would be at the cost of other state, which means that the relations among the state would be conflicting in nature, and the state is what, state is in short we can say behaving in a kind of jungle, where we can say that there is an anarchical situation that prevail in the nation state system, and every state trying to maximize its power, and to achieve that sort of power, state trying to maximize its own economy or economic objective. So, in that context we can say there are two types of view. One is aggressive in nature, another is defensive in nature. So, the defensive kind of approach of the state is to maximize its own economy. In that sense, the state, while taking any sort of decision, or the state persons while taking decision on behalf of the state, the basic objective is to maximize its power through the maximization of economic gain when the state is behaving in the state system or state international system. So, in that context, the state would not take care the vibrancy, economic development or economic aspirations of the other state, and there is no chance of win-win situation in the economic dependency or economic engagement of the states in the international system. Rather, every state's economic aspiration as a means to achieve political goals is different from the others. Rather, state would get that sort of power, that is the political power, through the means of economy, it as the courts of other states. So, it is a kind of conflicting situation where state behave in an anarchical way, and there is no any sort of common goal to achieve that. So, it is more based on zero sum game. So, the economic goal is what? The economic goal is to achieve the state power. So, in short we can say that the relationship between politics and economics from the perspective of Mercantile, state is the primary actors and the state political goal is more important, national interest defined in terms of political power, and to achieve or to maximize those power, state would be engaged in enhancing its economic capacity. So, in doing so, the state will not take into considerations the factors of the other states or the factors or the economic aspiration or the national interest or the economic interest of any other nations in the nation state system. Rather, the state would enhance or would be engaged in enhancing its own capacity, economic capacity, so that state would be in a position to maximize its national power, and national power is the basic means to have the dominancy and hegemony in the nation state system. So that defined more in terms of realistic interpretation of the international relations. So the basic goal is what? The basic goal of the state to achieve state power and the economic goal is a kind of means to achieve that state power or the national power of a particular nation. So in short, we can say the international relations are kind of arena of interstate competitions, and the world economy is one in which states seeks to maximize their wealth and independence vis-a-vis other state is concerned. And other important things that we have to discuss or we have to take into account, that the order is achieved only where there is a balance of power or hegemony of a particular state, which means that in the state system order can be achieved through balance of power, as in the case of realistic approach to international relations, where the responsibility of creating order in the society or order in the state system goes to the major powers, and it is the major powers that engage or that should engage in creating a balance of power in the state system, which means that if there is a kind of more power in the power distributions among the state, once the major powers having the stability in terms of power distributions, and that power distribution in the process of power distribution and maximization of power through the means of economic goals or economic factors. So which means that the balance of power is very important, or the hegemony of these major powers is very important, which means that if a particular state having the hegemony over the other state, and hegemony is also referring the consent of the smaller state, which means that if the state creating a kind of international system or international institution, the rules and regulation would be decided by the major powers or by the superpower. In that sense, the major power in that way would be in a position to get the confidence and to get the consent of the smaller power that their economic aspiration or their economic goal would be only satisfied if the smaller power is abiding the rules and regulations that was created or approved by the major power. So the balance of power is the means, hegemony is the another means, through that the order can be achieved in the international system. So this is how the mercantile approach understand or explain the relationship between the political factors and the economic factors, and in that how the state as a main actor or state is important actor in the international system, and the objective of the state is to maximize power. The objective of the state is to gain maximum power in the distribution of the powers in the international system, and that power or the national power of the state only can be achieved by enhancing the economic capacities of that particular states. And in order to create a kind of stability, political and economic stability, it is the responsibility of the major powers that to create a kind of balance of power in the nation state system, and other way it is the hegemony through that the state can create a kind of economic and political order in the nation state system. So this is the basic understanding, basic discussion that we have discussed so far as to understand the political economic interdependency or the political economic relationship from the perspective of mercantile view or the mercantile approach as a traditional approach to understand international political economy. Now friend, we will discuss the another aspect of traditional approach to international political economy that we call as the liberal approach to understand international political economy. It's another kind of perspective, and that is against the discussion that we have done as a mercantile view to understand international political approach of international relations. So the liberal approach is the another perspective of the traditional approach to international political economy, in that the relationship between economics and politics, the basic arguments of the liberal approach or the liberal approach of international political economy within the discipline of international relations, that the economic aspect or the economic factors, for example, the market system, and the economic engagement, economic activities, these are autonomous in nature. In the first argument, that is the mercantile approach to international political economy of IR, in that state was considered as a main actor. It is the objective of the state to maximize its power through the means of enhancing economic capacity and economic capacity and economic interdependency with the other state in the nations. But in the case of liberal approach to international relations, the relationship between economics and politics, in that the economy is autonomous, which means that there must be a less and less control of the economic activities or the market activities or free trade and commerce or international trade and commerce among the state. In that there must be a lesser and lesser control by the state. So, in the case of mercantile approach, it is the state that control the domestic economy, as well as when the state interact with the other state in international system, it is the state that control the political factors as well as the economic factors. But in the case of liberal understanding of IPE, the IPE in the perspective or from the perspective of liberal approach, they consider that economic factors is autonomous, the trade and commerce, international trade and commerce among the state, it is autonomous in nature, which means that the market should operate on the basis of market principles, and there must not be any sort of control by the government in the sphere of economic activities or international trade and commerce. Rather, state would behave like a kind of facilitator that will only facilitate the economic activities among economic activities which is more autonomous in nature, and in that context it is the private investors, private entrepreneurs, private business holders, they will decide or they will rather influence the decision of the government. So, the main actors or the unit of analysis from the perspective of liberal approach to international political economy, in that individuals and the private firms are the main actors, which means that the individuals or the private investors, private entrepreneurs, they actually engage in the business of international monetary system, international economic system, international trade and commerce. It is not the state that engage in that, rather the state should not control the activities of the private investors, private firms or any sort of multinational companies. So, in that context, it limits the power of the government. The power of the government is not to regulate, is not to control, rather it is only to regulate the private firms or the private firms or private investors that operate in the nation state system. So, the nature of the economic relation is more cooperative in nature, and it is based on positive subgame, and the economic goal from the perspective of liberal approach to liberal approach as a traditional approach to international political economy is that the maximum individuals and the social well-being, that is the economic goal, means the maximum benefit and the maximization of the satisfaction of the individuals, firms and the social beings are the main objective. It is not the objective of the state or the national interest of the state to be satisfied, rather it is more the satisfaction of the individuals, private firms and the social beings as a whole. So, it reminds that liberal approach also, that liberal approach to international political economy, it also reminding the liberal approach to international relations, where in that the liberal approach to international relations, there was a kind of dependency, and that dependency paved the way for the cooperative kind of relationship among the state. The difference between the liberal approach to IR and the liberal approach to international political economy is that there must be a kind of less control by the state. The private firms, the private actors, that is the non-state economic actors, they are the important units of analysis, and in the functioning of the state with the rest of the state, the decision of the state or the statecrafts who take decision on behalf of the state, they are largely influenced by the private firms and corporations, which means that the taxation policies, the import and export policies, free trade and commerce, in that whatever factors are engaged, it is not the state that will take the autonomous decision, rather the decision of the state would be influenced by these important corporations or the private firms and the private investors or the private entrepreneurs. So that it is the state which interact in the state system, but the decision of the state are largely influenced by or guided by the interest of that private firms and private investors. So it basically giving the way or pave the way for the more cooperations among these actors, that is the individual and private firms in the international political economy or the economic system, and state would have less control so far as the functioning of the economy is concerned. So in that context, the another the extension of that debate is the arrival of the new liberal economic institutions as well. So that we will discuss in the later on more in detail, but from the reference to understand that particular liberal approach, the new liberalism after 1980s started, and that give much importance to the international system. So in the liberal approach, in the starting of that discussions or starting of that sort of analysis to the international political economy, they focus more about the freedom or the free exchange or free engagement of these private firms. But after that, because of the arrival of the new liberal understanding of the international political economy, they also focusing on the international structure as well. And to create that sort of structure, there must be a creation of various institutions to regulate that sort of international trade and commerce, in that the private and the state actors engage in that. So to regulate that international system or international economic system or global economy, there must be specialized agencies, specialized institutions to regulate that. In that context, we see a various kind of institution, for example IMF, and also later on the creation of GATT or conversion of the GATT into WTO and World Bank. So these are the institutions that actually regulate the global economic system, and where the state would have lesser and lesser power or control over the functioning of the economic system. So these are the basic argument which is related to the liberal approach to international relations. So in short, we can say the world economy has the potential to be a seamless global marketplace in which free trade and free movement of capital shape the policies of government and economic actors. So these are the basic argument that the economy is more autonomous in nature, and it has the potential to perform in an autonomous and independent way, and that relations would be from the perspective of creating various institutions to regulate that. And the main argument that the state has lesser power or will have the lesser power to control. There must be a maximum freedom, and the economy, international economy would work as an autonomous would work on an autonomous basis, and it has the potential to work on a free way, and it paved the way for the free trade, free commerce, and the taxation policies and other related policies of the government would be influenced by the aspiration and wishes of these particular individual firms and multinational company. The another thing explanation that we need to explain here is that the order would be achieved by the invisible hand of competitions in the global marketplace, which means that the stability and the order would be not by the state or the hegemonic state or by creating a balance of power, as in the case of mercantile view of international political economy. In the case of liberal approach to international political economy, it is more about the kind of various organizations, their interrelationship in the international system, the various forms, economic institutions which work in the international system in the era of economy. They are not much visible to the people, which means that it is not the state that has the responsibility of creating a kind of order in the international system. Rather, these forms, their interrelationship, their decision, their aspirations, and their influence on the functioning or the decision of the government, that are more important, which is less visible to the people, but they actually controlling the whole economic system, world economy, and it is their responsibility to create order in the international system or international economic system or world system. So these are the basic argument that we need to understand, that we need to discuss from the perspective of liberal approach to international political economy. So the difference between the mercantile approach and the liberal approach, in the mercantile approach it is the state that is the primary unit, and so in the case of mercantile approach state is the unit. In the case of liberal, it is the individual firms, economic firms that are the main unit, and the market has the potential to fulfill the aspiration of the individuals living in any part of the world. So the benefit of the social well-being, the aspiration, fulfillment of the aspiration of the social well-being is the basic motto of that liberal perspective of international relations. As in the case of mercantile approach, it is the aspiration and the objective of the state which is paramount, and that is expressed in terms of political interest or the political objective. To achieve that, the economic capacity or the economic factors is the means to achieve that sort of political objective of the state. So these are the things, these are the basic arguments that are related to the mercantile approach to international political economy and the liberal approach to international political economy.